this is the Redfin CEO, okay? The Redfin CEO specifically is talking about the housing market and what's going on with it. Now, I'm going to give you what it is that they say, and then I'm going to break it down from a C student's perspective, okay? Make sure you guys hit a like for the algorithm, subscribe to the channel, turn on your notifications, and then more importantly, share this with a friend and family. And if you want to level up and go in a direction and align yourself with a group of people that's going in the direction that you're going in, make sure you tap into the Patreon. That link is in the description. And then last but not least, tap into the Discord. The link to the Discord is in the description of any of the most recent posts inside of the Patreon. Let's get into it, y'all.
Joining us now is Redfin CEO Glenn Kelman. Glenn, welcome back. Good to see you.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we know these high mortgage rates are wreaking havoc on the housing market. They're a disaster. How big of a disaster is it right now?
Well, it's been a slow building disaster, so I don't think it feels more apocalyptic now than it did 4 months ago. The housing market is just taking a beating because affordability is at a 4-decade low. And so at some point, we just need to catch a break from the Federal Reserve, and that doesn't seem likely to happen in 2023.
Now, you cannot have it both ways, ladies and gentlemen. We're about to go and deep dive into this. It all starts to come together, and this is why you have to make sure that you tuned into the Millionaire Morning Show every single morning. And if you do not catch it, because you may have a meeting, right? I understand a lot of y'all at work, a lot of y'all truck drivers, you got to get out, take care of your business, unhitch, get all your little stuff signed off and whatever, right? Because it all comes back down to the money. And one of the reasons that it comes back down to the money is because I've been breaking down inflation, how inflation then affects what it is that you got going on in your personal life, how that affects housing. Then the Fed has to raise rates because that's one of the tools that they have in order to fight inflation, right? It's the main tool that they have because they can't necessarily control the market. They can manipulate the market, but they can't necessarily control the market, right? And then, so they start to raise rates. Most people say, well, we need to get down inflation. We need to get down inflation. Well, your inflation, meaning the cost for you to do business and then be able to buy and purchase goods and services, is still going to go up. You know why? Because you want to buy a house and everybody has been selling you on the idea that, well, you need to get out of renting and make sure that you go and get a mortgage because at least you can continue to keep up with the rate of inflation because the value of your house is going to continue to go up, right? Well, 7% now versus a year ago or 2 years ago when you were doing 3.5% is a much different payment because most people are doing payments. Shout out to Big Pete. I'm going to be reading on Super Chat shortly. Most people equate what it is that they're going to do or where they're going to live based off of how much their mortgage payment is going to be. All right. So affordability is the total cost in order for you to be able to survive, thrive, and then to continue to have housing over your head. That's affordability. The difference with affordability versus what it is that you're talking about as far as inflation. Remember, we're going to break this down from a C student's perspective. Inflation is the value of your dollar continuing to go down, which means that the cost of doing business is going to continue to go up. When we see people protesting, right? I heard that there was protesting over in somewhere at Taco Bell for $30 an hour somewhere. Waffle House. Y'all got to send me that email. Somebody send me the email of Waffle House employees protesting for $30 an hour, right? We seen this happening a year ago, 2 years ago when they was protesting. Oh my God. Okay, Corey. Corey says, Anton, you just lost me. The Federal Reserve is the reason we have inflation. I thought you were smarter than that. No, the Federal Reserve is not the reason that we have inflation. The Federal Reserve is not the reason that we have inflation entirety. There's a lot of different factors that goes into why we have inflation, right? Pandemic. I don't really want to deep dive into that because that's a sensitive subject and I don't want to get deplatformed or get demonetized or anything like that. When you see that things are playing out, when you pay attention to what's going on with as far as how much money we're giving over to Ukraine, when you talk about debt, credit, when you talk about the manufactured housing crisis that we had in 2008, when you're talking about $33+ trillion in debt, when you're talking about the cost of living, then people are starting to protest, talking about how much they need as far as per hour in order to do so. Those costs are then passed over into the consumer. When you're talking about the cost of oil, infrastructure, building, taxes, all of those things fall into what inflation is because the value of a dollar is not even worth the paper that it's printed on. The value of the dollar is based off of our belief in it. Listen to me. The value of a dollar is based off of your belief in it. It's not even worth the paper that it's printed on. Your inflation might be different from my inflation based off of what your lifestyle is. Our currency used to be backed by things that were held in the Federal Reserve, but now it has no inherent value. So now that is translated into what your belief in that dollar is, which is why rich people continue to get rich, because we then put all of our money into assets. We don't necessarily hold it in the cash. Okay? So since it used to be backed by something that was in the Federal Reserve, and it's no longer backed by anything inside of the Federal Reserve, the value of it is based off of what our lifestyle is. Correct, DLC, like gold. But since they continue to print more money and put it into circulation, the value of that dollar continues to go down because it's not necessarily backed by anything other than your belief in it. So because we're interdependent on it in order to have goods and services and not kill each other, they're able to print more money, which then devalues the dollar itself. Now let's continue on home sales, because I'm going to translate that for you guys and then help you to bring that into your purview so you can understand how that's going to affect you and your future house hunting services, your real estate purchases, and your investment opportunities as far as building the assets that's going to beat the rate of inflation. Okay?
Is it having the desired effect on prices, on rents, given it's also coming up against this backdrop of super low inventories?
That is the problem. So it has certainly depressed employment in the real estate sector, but it hasn't hurt prices. Prices keep going up. Usually in a downturn like 2008, people don't want to sell, but they have to sell because foreclosure is imminent. In this case, we have had a soft landing. The rest of the economy is doing well. People are not in dire economic straits. And with a 3% mortgage, there's no way they're going to put that house on the market. So we've had a downturn in sales volume, but an upturn in prices. And that means that the sales volume crimp is just going to last a long, long time.
So as long as interest rates stay high, you'll have less people selling their home, because if they sold their home, where would they go? If you sell your home and then you take the equity out of the home, unless you're making an investment, it's foolish for you to either sell your home, get a home equity line of credit, or to continue to cash out the value in your home, because then you'd have to operate under a higher interest rate. Your interest rate would change. Your interest rate would change, meaning that you'd be paying more for the same money. Before, they used to say money was cheap when interest rates were low. That means that I can make more money off the money, taking the value out of it in order to buy more assets. Now, if you decide that you wanted to buy a house, you'd have to sell the current home that you're in. Let's look at it from two different perspectives, right? Let's say you're a first-time home buyer or you're a current home owner, and you want to actually move to a different place in the United States. Your job is transferring you. You want to move the kids over here. You actually want to move down south or whatever, so on and so forth, right? And you still have a mortgage on that house. Most people have a mortgage on their house because they have a 30-year mortgage, because that's what was marketed to you by the banks, right? But very few people actually want to sell, because when they have to go and purchase another home because they don't have the cash to buy it outright, they'd have to get another mortgage. They're basing it off of what their payment is going to be, and nobody wants to take a 7% interest rate when you already at 3.5%, because that's a huge gap. That could be an extra $1,500 a month, $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month, depending on the price of the home that you purchase. A month. And that is not even a total cost of what it takes in order for you to have home ownership, a perceived home ownership, because you also got to take into account the property taxes. Property taxes, maintenance, utilities. When you sell that home, you also have to pay 3 or 6%, depending on whether or not you are the realtor or not. Realtors specifically are suffering right now because A, nobody wants to buy their home, and then B, the people that are purchasing homes are purchasing it at a higher interest rates, which means that their affordability is lower. The amount of money that they have to be able to purchase a home, how much you have to put down for a down payment. So what do? Let's continue to hear what the CEO of Redfin is saying.
Yeah, we've had some in the realty business suggest that ongoing demographic trends, marriages, having kids.
Somebody said, I was unaware. Look. This is people trying to debate me. I was unaware that different inflation rates, there are different inflation rates from person to person. Well, it absolutely is. Because how inflation affects you is much different than how it affects me. The cost of me having to be able to do business and goods and use goods and services every day is much lower than yours because I am not affected by what's going on in the housing market. I'm benefiting from it. I don't have any mortgages. I don't have any loans out. As a matter of fact, let's just say, for example, you own an electric car, but you own a house. The cost for you to be able to drive that car, if you charge it up at home, is higher than mine because it doesn't cost me to charge it anything. So the cost of you being able to operate on a daily basis means that inflation is affecting you differently. I don't have to go to the grocery store and be able to spend the type of money that you spend at the grocery store. I don't have to leverage money the same way that you leverage money. And see, this is the reason why you guys need to get understanding, because you guys are just talking. It doesn't necessarily mean you have any understanding. You just talking based off of a talking point, not based off of your real life. And this is why I don't want y'all to mute anybody in the chat, because they don't have any understanding. Yes, inflation affects you differently. The rates that you're affected by is much different than what it is that it affects me by, because it depends on where you live in the country, right? And what your lifestyle is, and whether you interdependent on something else in order for you to be able to feed your kids. Absolutely, you're affected differently with regard to the inflation rates. I'm not affected by what's going on with inflation as far as the rates that the banks are giving out for mortgages, because I don't have a mortgage. Everything that I'm doing, I'm paying cash for. So you can go by whatever the rate that the federal government gives you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you're paying with regard to the rate of inflation as it affects your life personally. It's an individual thing, but we have to extrapolate it from what it is that they're giving us in a general sense. From a C student's perspective, this is the most basic explanation that you can use in order to make sure that you make adjustments to your own personal life. And this is one of the reasons why I show you the receipts and I show you how to build certain things, how to be able to build certain businesses, how you can build your own home for much cheaper, right? Is it better for you to buy land and build? Can you do it without any financing? The cost of you being able to do business in the real estate market depends on what part of the business that you're in. Do you need a hard money loan? What's the holding period? How much is the cost going to be as far as you building a home in Detroit or Michigan versus down there in Texas? And then what is the building materials going to cost? Huh? Let's continue.
College, even dying, means that the industry will churn through some of these rate levels, which, of course, we coexisted with a couple decades ago. I wonder if you think that's too Goldilocks.
No, I mean, if you look at the number of existing home sales in the United States, it goes between 4 and 6 million.
I'm going to read that super chat shortly.
Went to a 6.5 billion annualized rate, nearly 7, but it's never gone below 4 since we've been tracking it. And the population is about 10% larger than the last time we hit that low, which was in 2008. So we are now at the most basic level of Maslow's hierarchy, where shelter is a human need. The only people who are moving are the ones who absolutely have to. And there are people who are relocating because they're being called back to work, or they get a divorce, or there's a death in the family. So those are the only reasons that people are moving. I wouldn't call that a Goldilocks scenario. I would call that rock bottom.
Hey, listen, don't worry about the troll, the main troll in the chat. He always disagrees with everything, whether we're talking about relationships, money, interest rates, housing, real estate, professionalism with regard to your job, modern women. Come on, man, y'all should pay attention to this. You know what's going to happen. Let them rock. They learning just like you are. They just projecting as though they actually know something that they really don't. Let's continue.
But that's where we are right now. And the only relief is that it can't go much lower. We haven't seen 3.7 million homes sold across the United States since we've been tracking the number. 4 is about as low as it can go.
So then, Glenn, how are you thinking about and planning your business around 2024? Is it a recovery year for real estate? Are you making moves in anticipation around hiring agents or more downbeat?
Do you remember when Rambo is asked, Rambo, how will you live? And he says, day by day. That's how we're
Come on, man. Just answer the question. You don't have to give any bad jokes.
planning this business.
Okay.
We can't look 3, 6, 9 months out. What we face right now is 7.5% mortgages, 4 million annualized home sales rate. We're living in the now. And if things get better, that'll all be upside in the business.
How is your business dealing with the changing rate environment?
I don't really care about what Redfin's business is. Let me move over into the next thing because we want to pay attention to what mortgage rates are doing to the housing market across the United States.
And my next guest warns that the recent rise in mortgage rates will test the resiliency of all those new home sales. And he's forecasting fewer than 5 million total homes will be sold this year. That's the fewest in 12 years. Joining us now is Douglas Duncan, Fannie Mae's chief economist. And we are also pleased to be joined by real estate pro Don Peebles, chair and CEO of the Peebles Corp, to weigh in on all of this. So welcome to you both. Doug, I'll just start with you. And I think it's important, especially for investors who've been so focused on the strength of the home builder index, to understand that the housing market broadly is still, well, how would you describe it? Quite slow.
Yeah, it's a tough market. If you're a realtor or a mortgage lender, you're feeling like this is a serious recession. If you think about it, we went from about 6 million homes at an annual pace down to about a little over 4 million homes at an annual pace. That's roughly a third drop in the business in your industry. So when you put on top of that the disappearance of the refinance business, it's feeling really rough for the mortgage space.
Right.
It's really funny because, interestingly enough, I've been in banking for a long time, and a lot of you guys already know that. You know that my background is in banking, right? And I remember during the pandemic, it was literally a run. It was everybody was coming in to either get refinanced or they were getting approved for a mortgage because interest rates were so low and everybody was refinancing their home. Either they were refinancing their home or they were trying to purchase new homes. Now, the caveat to that is, and we had a ton of people that was running into the bank all at the same time. Remember, multiple different factors was happening here. Money was cheap because the federal government had to incentivize you to continue to spend. They were giving out cheap money on top of it, right? And then people were working from home. So since more people were home, people were spreading out. They were moving out. They were moving out from major cities in order to buy properties that was outside of where they would normally be. Now everybody has to move back into the city or they have to make a trek back into the city. And so they're affected by that. But everybody got trapped in the home. And also on top of that, people were purchasing homes. People were purchasing homes way above the actual rate that they were listed at. People were getting homes $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 over the asking price for those homes with no inspection whatsoever. No inspection whatsoever. People were buying homes $100,000, $200,000 above asking with no inspection whatsoever. And what it did was it accelerated the amount of people that were actually applying for a home that was getting approved for a loan or who was going to do a refinance. And so now those same people are sitting on those same rates because they're afraid to pull money out of their house regardless of how they're going to use it or what their plan is because the interest rate was so low and they don't want that much higher payment as a result of it. Remember that. They accelerated the amount of people that were going to refinance because money was so cheap and the federal government was incentivizing you to continue to keep the industry flowing. Whereas now, and that's one of the reasons that inflation exploded, whereas now they have to continue to raise rates in order to fight the rate of inflation.
And I guess sort of on
which back then I told you guys that you weren't going to start feeling the effects of what's going on with regard to inflation until much later. Now we have people sitting here Now we have people sitting here complaining about the rate of inflation. They got a whole TikTok trend that's happening right now in which the majority of people are complaining about the rate of inflation and that they can't afford regular everyday things and the prices that they have to pay for all of the stuff that they're doing on a regular basis is out of control.
To that point, is the question about whether the strength we've seen in the pockets of home building and for the stocks that we've been following can continue, because as rates go higher, you're saying it's all the more important they continue to do buy downs or something to make this more affordable.
Yeah, what's unusual in this environment is typically housing is, if not the most interest rate sensitive, one of the most interest rate sensitive sectors. So when the Fed starts raising rates, typically construction starts to slow. That's the first part of the cycle. And then that's followed by sales on the way down. In this environment, because the boomers are doing what they said they were going to do and aging in place, and because the Gen Xers have locked in 3% mortgages, it's really all on the back of the builders to increase supply. So this has been a pretty good.
Which is one of the reasons why, what are we doing inside of the Patreon? Building houses. Building houses. One of the things that we're doing, and this is the reason why I'm documenting the process for you guys in order to give you the insight, because I would never tell you to do something that I haven't already done. That is why we've been purchasing land over the last few years. Remember that I told y'all that I was purchasing land? I was showing y'all the receipts inside of the Patreon. Y'all couldn't understand, why is Anton not jumping into the real estate market, getting these same turnkey properties and then renting them out and holding on to them for the extended period of time? Because I was unwilling to pay the prices that they were paying. And so I adjusted my strategy in order to make sure that I pivoted and then profited the way that I was supposed to profit, because I did not want to participate in it just because everybody else was doing it. I've been telling y'all this. I've been really highlighting and prepping y'all for what is going to happen for over 3 years now.
Good market for them, surprisingly, even though the rates have been rising. Demographics are in their favor, and the slow supply suggests it's going to be the builders that are going to be adding to supply and trying eventually equaling things out between buyers and the sellers.
So let me pivot for a second.